Hey, how are you guys doing today? My name is Silas Wilby and this is Exploring the Bible Today. And today we're going to be talking about a somewhat controversial subject, the Apocrypha, or as Catholics call these 7 books, Deuterocanonical or Second Canon. Now there's a good chance you don't even know the names of these books since they, well, haven't been in most Protestant Bibles. So let's get that out of the way real quickly. First, there are 1st and 2nd Maccabees, there's Baruch, Tobit, Judith, the Wisdom of Solomon, Sirach or Ecclesiasticus, additions to Esther, and additions to Daniel. So why aren't these books in the Protestant Bible? Well, long story short, after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, with increased persecution from the Romans and competition from the fledgling Christian church, the Jewish leaders at the time, this was around 100 AD, came together and declared its official canon of scripture, eliminating these 7 books. Now each of these do have their own separate reason for being removed, but I'll get there in just a second. The Christian church at the time, however, did not follow suit but kept all 7 books. And then 1500 years later, when the Protestant reformers established their own version of the Bible, they adhered to the Old Testament, which had been established by the Jewish rabbis I mentioned earlier back in about 100 AD. And Martin Luther did not regard these 7 books and the other parts of Daniel and Esther as scripture, but as, quote, useful and good for reading. Then following the Protestant Reformation, the Council of Trent in 1546 reaffirmed that all 46 books of the New Testament, thereby including the Deuterocanonical books, are canonical and authoritative. Now, a common misconception I grew up thinking, and I'm sure a lot of you did too, is that these books were in the New Testament and had some weird different doctrines like the Gospel of Mary or whatever, but no. These are all Old Testament books, so let's take a quick look at each of the books and explain why they were removed by the Jewish scholars back almost 2,000 years ago now. And then we will look at why Martin Luther stuck with that version of canon about 500 years ago. First off, we have the 1st and 2nd Maccabees, and if we're being completely honest, the Maccabees are kind of cool. Literally, it's a detailed account of the battles of a dude named Judah Maccabee and his brothers while they basically fight off foreign conquerors. I mean, that's pretty cool to me. These books include within the earliest references to the story of Hanukkah. So why were these 2 books removed from the Septuagint? Well, there are 2 main theories. One theory is that only the original books that were written in Hebrew were considered for inclusion in the canon. However, the book of Daniel, although included within the canon, is to a large extent written in Aramaic. Even more problematic is the fact that scholars believe that the first book of the Maccabees was indeed written originally in Hebrew, therefore meeting the language criterion for inclusion, and yet it is absent from the biblical canon. Okay, that just sounded smart. Basically, it ain't in there. Second is politics, actually. At the time, the Romans would not have looked kindly upon the widespread use of a text about successful revolts, and, well, the Pharisees and Sadducees may have had something to do with this as well, seeing as the Pharisees and Sadducees could basically never get along. And this may have been the reason the Maccabees weren't included, as the Sadducees openly didn't agree with the Pharisees and their support of the Maccabees. Family drama from ancient Israel for ya. But that's just a theory. A game theory. Anyway, next. The 3rd book is the Book of Baruch. The Book of Baruch is included within the prophetic books, and it's named after the guy Baruch who served as a scribe for the prophet Jeremiah, Jeremiah 36:4. Now, honestly, after spending hours upon hours researching, I couldn't tell you any special reason why Baruch wasn't included, save it was never quoted by Jesus, and scholars do point out what seems to be an error or 2 in the book. And yes, I read it like 3 times, and I still honestly don't know, so let's just move on and I'll cover a bit more details at the end. 4th is the Book of Tobit. Tobit was an extremely devout Jew who was deported to Nineveh. He soon gained the trust of the king, but later he got into trouble with that very same king because he buried some Jews that king had executed. Everything goes wrong for him, his property is confiscated, he loses his sight, his friends and even his wife taunt him, and then when everything is going terrible, he begs God to let him die because to him, life holds no more. So, you know, it's just about as fun as Job. And as far as why it was moved, well, it wasn't included in the Hebrew Bible canon, and Martin Luther said, nah. 5th is the Book of Judith. The Book of Judith is similar to the Book of Esther in that it is the story of a woman saving all of Israel through a wise widow named, you guessed it, Judith. However, Judith is not an actual accurate story. Judith is meant to be a metaphor. The name Judith means Jewess. The character of Judith is therefore representative of the whole nation of Israel. In an almost constant battle against their surrounding nations, the Israelites had to depend on the Lord for their survival and subsistence. 6th, we have the Wisdom of Solomon, often simply called the Book of Wisdom. This book, however, was not written by Solomon, as you may have guessed. An ancient manuscript known as the Muratorian fragments, try saying that 10 times fast, refers to the Wisdom of Solomon as having been written by friends of Solomon in his honor. It is widely accepted today, even by the Catholic Church, that Solomon did not write this book, which dates back to the 1st or 2nd century BC, many centuries after the death of Solomon. Finally, 7th, we have Ecclesiasticus or the Wisdom of Sirach. I'm just going to call it Sirach because it's a whole lot easier to say than Ecclesiasticus. Sirach is pretty much what you'd expect. It's a collection of useful wisdom similar to the other books of wisdom. Kind of obvious if we're being completely honest, so, I suggest you read it. It has a lot of wisdom. So, moving on, because seriously, I don't have that much to say about this book, just read the title, Wisdom of Sirach. So now that we've got a little bit of a summary of each of these books, should they or should they not be included in the Bible? That's the big question. Well, let's take a quick look at why Martin Luther said no. Honestly, hours upon hours of research later, it was really hard to find an unbiased opinion on this. People like to weigh in on this if they have an opinion. So I'm just going to give you both sides of the coin. According to Catholics, Martin Luther decided not to keep these books because they contain doctrine he didn't agree with. And most Protestants claim that there are errors or that there aren't scripture because they aren't at all mentioned in the New Testament. But then again, neither are Ecclesiastes, Esther, and 1 Chronicles, and 1st and 2nd Maccabees, Wisdom, and Sirach are all mentioned or at least alluded to in the New Testament. So that doesn't really add up. Bear in mind as well that Luther also tried to get rid of James, Jude, Hebrews, and Revelations. And by the way, guys, I am not Catholic, even if I do sound like I'm taking a very Catholic stance on these books. I'm not a preacher or a pastor, so I'm not even going to try and tell you whether or not these books should be still in the Bible. However, after reading them several times each, I do think that they should definitely be read, even if you just look at them the same way Martin Luther did, as useful and good for reading. Anyway, I'm not going to answer this for you as I can't, but I hope this video at least helped you get a better understanding of the 7 books you've probably never read. And if you have any questions or video requests, please leave them in the comments down below. I will be happy to answer all of them. Anyway, this has been Exploring the Bible today. My name is Silas Willoughby, and I'll see you guys in the next one.